Ready, we should begin. Yeah, now.
A very warm good evening to one and all present here. I, Ekta Dogra, will be the host of today's event. I feel great pleasure apprising you all of the fact that this will be the 20th event of E-Academy, and it is our honor to have Dipshika Behra ma'am with us on this occasion to speak upon the topic Retelling Histories, Reimagining Identities, the Mia Poet of Assam. I would now request Vinay Anand to please take over and welcome our honorable guest speaker, respected faculty members, and all the dear participants joining us today. Over to you, Vinay.
Thank you, Ekta. So, good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure and honor on behalf of the Department of English, Karim City College, to give my heartiest welcome to guest teachers and all my fellow students. Today, we have gathered here for an online lecture, a lecture where we'll get to know about stories. Stories not about the great conquerors or leaders, but about the common folk who share the general heritage of sorrow and joy. And it also reminds you about the great struggle of life and its ability to carve its legacy. And it's an honor and privilege to have among us Dipshika Behra ma'am, who is a very dynamic and affluent scholar. I'd also like to thank our head of department, Dr. S.M. Yahya Ibrahim, for this wonderful initiative and would extend my gratitude towards Dr. Neha Tiwari, Dr. Basudra Roy, Professor A.K. Das, and Professor Saket Kumar for making this dream a reality. Once again, I'd welcome you all for joining us and giving a reason for so many faces to smile and cherish this opportunity. Thank you very much. Over to you, Ekta.
Thank you, Vinay. Before we commence forth with this session, I would like to introduce Dipshika Behra ma'am to all our participants today. Dipshika Behra ma'am is a junior research fellow at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. She completed her master's from Miranda House, University of Delhi. Her research interests include untranslatability, word literature, language and meaning making, politics of translation, and Mia poetry. She has presented in several international and national conferences, including ACLA 2019 and NEMLA 2021. She is currently editing a special issue on untranslatability for a reputed international peer-reviewed journal. She can be reached at behradipshika@gmail.com. Now I would request Dipshika Behra ma'am to please take over and enlighten us with your enriching words. Over to you, Dipshika ma'am.
Thank you, Ekta. Thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity here today to share my research with you all. So, this is not going to be a lecture exactly, it will be more of a discussion. And I would really urge you all that if at any point you feel that there are things that are not coming across, please feel free to interrupt me so that I can describe it in detail. So, the title of today's talk is Retelling Histories, Reimagining Identities, the Mia Poets of Assam. Now, before getting into the topic and describing what it means, what do we mean by retelling, and the parenthesis in under the parenthesis in the retelling, I would like to give a brief introduction of who the Mia people are, where do they live, what is it about Mia poetry that we are discussing about it here tonight. So, Mia, the word Mia, as you know, is actually an Urdu word that means gentleman. Now, what is it about Mia, the word Mia in the context of Assam that makes Mia poetry so unique? So now, Mias are Bengal origin Muslims who migrated to Assam from the then undivided Bengal due to several reasons. You know, some of them were um, requested and taken away, taken, like for example, suppose today I went to Delhi to study and I see that there are a lot of opportunities out there. So I go and settle in Delhi. Now, few of my friends follow, and they find the place very productive, economically productive, socially, culturally. It was like uninhabited because of the vast stretches of, it was riverine islands. So one important aspect about this whole conversation is that the origin, the word, the term that I'm using, the Mias are Bengal origin Muslims, and it is not to be confused with Bengali Muslims, because even though their ancestry is Bengali, they do not identify themselves as Bengali. They feel that they are culturally, socially, and by birth Assamese. So hence the word Bengal origin Muslims. Some of the people who then lived in the undivided, India as a nation was not had not come into existence back then. So from the undivided Bengal, some went as tea plantation workers and they were employed by the Britishers. Some also went because of some got jobs there. So this migration that we are talking about, it is not 10 or 15 years old. This is as old as somewhere, before the first war of independence took place, which was in 1857. So it was before that. So we are talking about centuries and decades of ago that this migration took place. And what happened was, so these people, they settled in the area that we know as chor chaporis. Now, what is a chor and what is a chapori? A chor is actually a riverine island. Suppose there is a network of rivers, and there is a sedimentation. After the floods, there's a silt deposition, and that is where a community is established. Now, this is a shifting island, because every time the flood occurs, every time it washes away a part of that island. So their identities and their homes are constantly shifting. And that's the spot where they settle down because of several factors, political factors as well. But I would, before not going into too much detail on the aspect of migration, because I'll be coming back to it again and again, and I would like to talk a little bit about what is Mia poetry. Now, Mia poetry is poetry which was written in the dialect that the mother tongue that they speak in their homes, which apparently is not Assamese, because Assamese is the official language. When the people who settled in the Chorchapori areas, they were asked, back then Bengali was the official language of Assam and not Assamese. So they were asked by the Assamese nationalists to, identify Assamese as their language, as their mother tongue, due to which, in the census survey, the percentage of Assamese speaking people increased by 56.7%. And Assamese was then, it was then the official language of Assam. And this proposition of, that you say that Assamese is your language, and we will integrate you into our society, we will give you the status of an equal, and this promise was not kept. The condition, the Mias were almost they almost formed the lowest strata of the pyramid of the Assamese society. You go to Guwahati, which is one of the largest cities in Assam, and you look at any railway station, any roadside worker, any construction worker, 99% of them would be from the Mia community. And despite toiling hard, despite building the city on their own backs day and night, they are treated of the order of somebody who is an outsider, somebody who does not belong here, somebody. So there are several names being called for the people of this community. Some of them are Chodua, Pamua, Mia, Bangladeshi. So they are termed, they are branded as illegal immigrants. Now, the interesting question that comes here is that if The idea of India as a nation did not exist when this migration took place. Then how can somebody be called an illegal immigrant? The other aspect is that this word chorwa means somebody who settles in the chores. I explained what chor means, the riverine islands. Pamua, the other word is Pamua. Now, Pamua means that somebody who is a temporary settler, somebody who is here for a temporary business, they are not going to live here for long. But then these people have been living in that area for centuries, not just, I mean, all the Mia poets that I met and I talked to, their great great grandfathers had migrated. So their fathers even like there's a poet called Kazi Neil is one of the most young and dynamic poets, and his father had been a government service. He had been in government service, and after serving the government for 30 years, his name was not in the voter list during the process of NRC. So now I'm getting to the whole idea of the politics, the NRC, and what is it about Mia poetry that people are so, people feel that it threatens the presumed idea of coherence and integration in the society. So this is more or less the idea, the picture of where the people from Mia community, stand. Now, another interesting note about the word, and because I like digging into the word and the etymology. So when I went for my fieldwork, I talked about, I asked literally everybody on what is their perception of this word Mia. And it was very interesting to note that the people from the older generation, people who are in their 80s and 90s now, they were telling that this Mia word, the as the Urdu word says, gentleman, the in the context of Mia community and in the context of Bengali Muslims also, this word was always used as a token of respect for the elderly. Like for example, somebody who is a father-in-law, somebody who is a friend of the father-in-law, or somebody who is a great grandfather. So when somebody is addressing them, they would always say Mia ji. Now, this was the situation inside the household. Outside the household, in public spaces, in chance encounters, like we say in Hindi, "Oh bhaiya zara sunna," or I say in Bangla, "Oh babu ektu daran." So in a similar way, they would say, "Oh miya bhai ektu thamen." Thamen means stop in Assamese. So that is how the word Mia was used, always as a token of respect and a token of a very humble respect for somebody. Now this word was picked up by the extremists within the Assamese society, who felt that the settling down of these people was a cultural invasion. They felt that their language culture was being, attacked, and was gradually being changed by the people who have settled down here. And this word, the Mia word, which was supposed to be of the order of gentleman, became to be, associated with an idea that somebody who was not, an insider, somebody who is less than a human. And there are instances to support this allegation, and they support this whole humiliation, um, that always, like the poets I met, one such incident was one of the poets was in school. He was young, and suddenly somebody called him, "Oh look, he's a Mia." And they compared the existence of a Mia to that of an animal. So it was literally, calculated systemic violence being, perpetrated across centuries, dehumanizing somebody, and kind of flushing out their existence altogether. So that is how, I mean, and gradually this went to such an extent that today, in today's context, you would this Mia word has taken the context, okay, taken the notion of a racial slur. It's a vulgar word that any decent household would not even utter. So a word that means gentleman has over the time acquired this meaning because it has been through generations of perpetrating this whole idea of violence among uh, um, towards a certain group of people. So given that is the context of Mia. Now, what is happening here in Mia poetry? So, it is not the first time that in 2016, when Mia poetry, the first poem was written. So, it was not the first time that people were talking about the condition of the Mias, which was very, saddening. And it was not the first time. Kabir Ahmed is a noted poet who belongs to the older generation, and he had written, I'm reading out the lines. After 40 years of independence, I have no space in the words of beloved writers. The brush of your script writer doesn't dip in my picture. My name left unpronounced in assemblies and parliaments, on no martyr's memorial or no newspapers is my name printed, even in tiny letters. Besides, you haven't even decided what to call me. Am I Mia, Akhomia, or Neo Akhomia? This is a poem called I Beg to State that was written by Kabir Ahmed long back, where he describes the state of oppression faced by the Muslims of the Bengal origin. And this poem existed back then. But this poem did not create any sort of controversy. But what happened is that with this whole process of NRC coming in, now it is very interesting to note here. So for those who do not know what NRC is, the National Register of Citizens, that it's a bill that seeks to identify the illegal immigrants, and it seeks to detain them. So in the case of Assam, it has been there for a long time, and it was like last couple of years back we heard it in the national media on a very aggravated manner, but it had been in the case of Assam for a long duration. So what happened was, it is not that these people, the Mia poets or the people from the Mia community, they are not against NRC, because they feel that Abdul Kalam Azad, one of the poets, says in one of the interviews I took with him, he mentioned clearly that no, we are not against NRC. And when this NRC process was, it was announced that the NRC will take place, we were very happy and we wanted the people to be a part of it, so that for once and all, this issue and this debate is settled. That no, I'm not a um, outsider. I have the documents, I have the Aadhaar card, I have the residence proof. But it was only, they even helped out people filling out the forms, taking people to different places. And it was only midway through the process that they realized the cons in the situation, the perils of the process, that what it was not done for the benefit of these people. Because a slight spelling mistake and you are detained. You have been called to report to a place that is 200 kilometers far away from your home, and you're given the information a day before. And we are talking about a group of people who do not have the means to to do anything, because if you visit those places, there's literally nothing there. There are no scope for education, no scope for electricity, no healthcare. And every year, there's a flood situation, 3 to 4 times a year. They are constantly shifting their houses and belongings, and on top of that, the pandemic this year. So when they realized that no, this NRC process was not in favor of these people, that is when the poets and also other members of the community began writing about it, not just through their poetry, but also through different journalistic writing, different pieces in national and international media. Now, when Mia poetry was written, the first poem that comes as Mia poetry was written by Dr. Hafiz Ahmad. Now, I'll be sharing a small kind of a presentation, so please pardon me for the small this thing. And because the lines are written there, and I don't want it to be confusing, so I would just share the screen so that you all can see the. Is the screen visible to you all?
Yes,
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 it
it
is.
is.
Yes, ma'am,
Okay.
it's visible.
Ma'am.
So this is what a chore looks like. Like I mentioned about chores. These are pictures I took during my field work. So I'm sharing some of them with you all here. This is what a chore looks like, and this is a situation when there is no flood. During floods, this river that you see here is completely flooded, completely isolating the green part on the other side, and the people living in that particular area are actually stuck there. They cannot come to the main road, or wherever the relief camps are formed. So this is what a chore looks like. This is what a Mia hut looks like. These walls are jute walls, and this is it's extremely living conditions is very harsh, lack of resources, and this is what it looks like. And this is a traditional one, which is older one. Now also there are very few houses remaining like this, but most houses are look like somewhat like this now. It's a modern Mia hut made of tin sheets. So the tin sheets are the sheets that are given by the government officials, mostly by the NGOs working for flood relief, because compared to the jute ones, these are more hygienic. This is Hafiz Ahmed. He is a doctor. I mean, he has a post, like a PhD degree, and he actually works in a school. And not only apart from his work, he also has been, promoting Assamese culture and Assamese language among the community of Charchaporis, for the last few many years. Now, this is a poem called "Write Down I'm a Mia." So there is a poem by Mahmoud Darwish, a Palestinian poet, called "Write Down I'm Arab." So this is a Mia rendition of that poem where he says, "Write down, I am Mia. Write down, I am a Mia. My serial number in the NRC is 200543. I have two children. Another is coming next summer. Will you hate him as you hate me?" So these very opening lines, they talk about the hatred, the discrimination, the oppression that the Mia community has been subject to. And on top of the cultural discrimination or the societal discrimination that they have faced, it also talks about the state sponsored discrimination that is adding to the anxiety of the people. And this was what Hafiz Ahmed wrote, and he wrote it one night and he slept off. And the next morning he wakes up and he sees that this poem has become viral on Facebook, because people began immediately connecting to this. And in response, one of my very good friend and another amazing Mia poet and researcher, Dr. Shalim M. Hussain, he wrote this poem, Nana, I have written, in response to what Hafiz Ahmad sir had written. So this poem goes like, "Nana, I have written, attested, countersigned, and been verified by a public notary that I am a Mia. Now see me rise from flood waters and float over landslides, march through sand and marsh and snakes, break the earth's will, draw trenches with spades, crawl through the fields of rice and diarrhea and sugarcane and a 10% literacy rate. See me catch a plane, get a visa, catch a bullet train, catch a bullet, catch your drift, catch a rocket, wear a lungi to space, and there, where no one can hear you scream, thunder, I'm Mia, I'm proud." So now this poem by Shalim M. Hussain, if you read it closely, you see that there are this is not just poetry, but it is actually documented history of those untold narratives that are lost in the larger fabric of what we call a singular history, like behind this whole agenda of creating a single nation, single history under the banner of we the people. This is something that tells us about the numerous stories that are untold, that will probably never have been brought to the forefront if not for these poems. So in this poem he also talks about the literacy rate of this population, which is very less. So eventually describing the living condition and the development of the particular community, talks about fields of rice through diarrhea and sugarcane. So because it's a flood afflicted region, so it's very common, diarrhea, typhoid, jaundice, all these kind of malaria, all these kind of diseases are very common, and the healthcare is very bad in that in that particular area. He also talks about the flood situation, the landslide that takes place, and also about lungi. Now, this lungi here is very important. So I'm assuming that people who live in and around Jamshedpur and Jharkhand, they know what a lungi means, right? It's a checkered cloth piece which is worn in the lower part of the body, especially by men. Now, why is this lungi so important? I'll come to that, because this lungi is a very distinctive identity of the Mia community. This lungi is something that makes one identify a Mia immediately, the lungi and the beard. Now, it is because of this lungi that several people who have been dressed up like that have actually encountered a lot of discrimination just on the basis of what they're wearing. Because the moment they see a lungi and a beard, they just say, "Oh, Mia Bangladeshi," and that's the how the abusing starts in the context of Assam. So this is one of the poems that Shalim wrote. Now, another poems, apart from Shalim, Rehana, Sultana, Qazi Neel, Aminur Rahman, a lot of other people. Now, this is Qazi Neel. He is the youngest Mia poet among all of them. And this is a very, very powerful poem written by Qazi. And if you are aware of a Bengali poet called Jivanananda Das, it he talks about this poem called "Ye Desh Che Amar Ami Deshan Noy," means this country is mine, but I'm not of this country. And he uses that because he's an avid reader, and he uses that and uses that in the context of the Mia community, that where he says that the land that makes my father an alien, that kills my brother with bullets, my sister with gang rape, the land where my claim over a lungi is suspect, a Mia is subhuman, every Chorwa a Bangladeshi, where demanding rights throws you under the plummeting fists of ghosts. That land is mine, I am not of that land. The land where my home and heart is uprooted, where my heritage is negated, where my blood flows cheap and no one pays, where they play politics with my son's coffin and gamble with my daughter's honor. The land where I wander crazy, confused as a beast. That land is mine, I am not of that land. Now, when it came to these kind of poems that were written by the Mia poets, it actually, created a genre. Mia poetry came into existence as a genre in itself within a span of 1 month. And people started writing not only in the dialect, but also in English, also in Assamese, also in the other tribal languages, because Assam has a lot of tribal population and a lot of different ethnic, varieties within itself. So all those people who felt that they were also at the margins and they needed a voice, began to associate themselves with Mia poetry. And initially, what the poets described to me, that initially it was not all negative. There were a group of people who were against the idea, but there were also few people from the Assamese community who did support them. Now, with the whole onset of NRC and what I told you about, the poets realizing that no, this was not helping them at all, or the people from the community at all, when they began to write, this sudden, there was a sudden shift in the reaction of the Assamese communities towards Mia poetry. And so much so that a journalist called Pranavjit Dalai actually filed an FIR in the name of 10 poets and accusing them of inciting xenophobic. Xenophobia is hatred for a particular community or hatred for an outsider. And xenophobic sentiments, and that was what the FIR accused them of, that they were picturing or painting Assam as a very xenophobic state in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of the international and national media. And that's why these people are threat to the Assamese society and they should be imprisoned. Now, this particular situation, this FIR actually, is what brought Mia poetry to the limelight in India at least. Because it was when you were accused of writing poetry, is that when people started getting to know about it, civil rights workers and human rights activists started supporting the poets, and that's how it gained momentum. But it affected their work because all these poets, they are not just armchair poets. They do a lot of work on the field. They run NGOs, they help the people, and it was difficult for them to do all of that work because they had to go in hiding. And it was only when everything was sorted, things became better and all with the help of law, that they were able to, come and do their work as as expected. So now coming back to this is again Rehana Sultana. She is one of the most dynamic women writers in the within the community, and it is surprising that the FIR also contained Rehana Sultana. And as the FIR mentioned that these are the people who are not, they're disrespectful of Assamese society and culture. It is very astounding to note that Rehana Sultana actually she has done her PhD in Assamese. She has had her education thoroughly in Assamese, and she speaks Assamese, and Assamese is like uh, almost like a mother tongue to her. So she felt really shocked by this whole incident. She was narrating it to me one evening that I never thought that a place where I've been born and brought up, and a place where the language I've been working on, and I have always promoted the language Assamese, and it is this time that I'm accused of not being respectful towards the language and the culture. So, um, so this again, I would come back for a while here, and I would just just a second. Yeah. So, so now I would just like to discuss something before moving to the other slides, that what exactly is about now Mia poetry that created a problem. So according to the poets, they feel that, this was the first time that there was anything written in the dialect that was just spoken till now. Nothing had come up. There was no documentation. There was no proof that this dialect existed. It was something which was talked about in they use the language to speak in their houses, but it was never used in any writing or any sort of public gathering. So that was one big fear, that what if what if this language gets documented, then obviously within no time it can pose a threat to Assamese society. At the same time, the major agitation was also that as long as you are writing for us in Assamese, it's fine. But when you are writing in English and you are writing in, to different international and international media, you are actually broadening this horizon. And that was their problem. They did not want these stories to come out. But for the poets, it was never like that. It was never an issue of dishonoring the Assamese culture. And in each and every interview and each and every discussion they have had, they always talk about this whole thing where they say that no, this is not something that we never intended to do this. What is their motto was? Their motto was that these are the stories of the people who are living in the margins of the margins. Now, for all of us, we know the condition and the reception of the northeastern states in the Indian, subcontinent. So, if you go to places, there are northeastern people who already face a lot of discrimination, because all the northeastern states are, talked about as one, but they are very different from each other and with very distinct culture of their own. So, Assam being already a marginal state, and Mia poetry being the Mia people being living in the margins of the margins, because it's like they live in one of the poorest district of India, in Barpeta, with very meager facilities. So they felt that these are the stories that need to be told at any cost. And like, this is where now I come to the idea of plurality. When I talk about the idea of differences, now why is it that difference is so important to Mia poetry and to the study of translation or world literature, or any study that we think about in today's time? That when I say that I am different from somebody, or somebody is different from me, is there is an assumption that we are superior than the other. Now, no, phenomenology or the study of experiences talks against this. That no, just because somebody is not like me does not mean that they are inferior. Somebody can be different, but it is that difference that we have to celebrate. So the Mia poets, they argue that if everybody, like Assam has some 500 something, ethnic identities living in Assam, and if they get to claim themselves as, for example, tribals and Assamese, I'm an Assamese, but I'm also a tribal. I'm an Assamese, but I'm also a Bengali Hindu. I'm an Assamese, but I'm also from the ancestors of Ahom Kingdom. So why can't we claim that, yes, I'm an Assamese and I am a Mia? Okay, so now the problem is that it is not just this identification, it is a very, larger power politics at play here. That how could these people use the word that was used to shame them and reclaim that to form their identity? It is almost like the Mia poets are, claiming the signifier of a language that was meant to humiliate and vilify them. So it's like you give me a slang, yes, and I own that slang with pride. So what you intended to do, you are failing at that. And that is the biggest problem with Mia poetry. And in one of the interviews, Abdul Kalam Azad and Shadim M. Hussain told me that initially they both had a very huge, I mean, a long discussion about whether to, uh, go forward with this proposition, whether to openly, explicitly claim the me identity or not. Because Abdul Kalam Azad has been working in the field, developmental projects, human rights projects, and he feels that no, I should get my work done, like I should work for the development of the people. I don't Initially he felt that, and he was telling me this himself, that I had a huge conversation with Shalim, and Shalim was insisting that no, we need to claim this word, we need to claim the word, that yes, we are Mia. Because the longer we deny, the longer we try to justify that we are not Mias, the more abuse will be thrown upon us. So he said that, and what is wrong with a Mia? Because initially the word was, the construct of meaning of the word Mia, which was prevalent in the Mia community, was not vulgar or racial slur. It was a token of gesture and a token of honor. So why not own that? Yes, I am a Mia. So what? So this is the politics of signification and semiotics behind this whole idea of Mia poetry, which Shalim M. Hussain, Hafiz Ahmad, Abdul Kalam Azad all came to an understanding, and that's when they understood, and that's when they started writing about this. This is the first time that they openly said, and when they say that, see, when we were talking about the oppressed condition of our people, we are not saying that we are not Assamese. We are just saying that these are the problems that our people have been facing, and it is high time that now we need to do something about it. So this was the situation what they felt, but that was taken out of context, and that was completely blown out of proportions, and a different kind of picture was painted, and that picture more or less still exists. Because recently, I would like to share my own experience. I went with the poet. I mean, I went to Assam, and I went to work with the poets and their organization, and we were traveling from place to place, and we once happened to travel to Manas National Park. So during our travel, and when we went and reached there, we saw that the people, the places where we were staying, or the place where we went to eat, the moment they see the ID card, their reaction changes. That, oh, Mia, I mean, how can they even have this much money to afford this resort or go to this restaurant to eat? So that is the level of dehumanization that has been happening even today. And even with me, like, I was told by a lot of people that don't even utter that word. We don't use that word in our houses. Like, so that is the level of discrimination that they have been facing. And in that kind of a situation, amidst all of that, the latest problems that the community started facing was the pandemic. And it was really difficult, because the government almost was very, very ignorant of the problems. And their team managed to raise around 20 to 30 lakh rupees for all the flood relief work, which was great work done. And apart from that, there are small initiatives that they are taking, which I would like to share. Like, one of them is free schooling for the people. Like, because of the lockdown now, there are different, the schools are all closed. So where will the students go and study? So what they have done is they have, located the area. They have located how many students are there, and each, for every 30 students, they have a teacher. will teach them every 2 to 3 days free of cost. And that entire, the expenses of the books and the copies, everything has be taken by the foundation, that has been created by the poets. Also, apart from this, was one initiative, wonderful initiative, one woman-led, completely rural development project called Amrapari Assam. Now, Amrapari means we can. Amrapari Assam is a group of women who stitch kanthas. If you don't know what a kantha is actually, you take old clothes and new clothes and you stack them in 3, 4, 5 layers, and then you stitch with your hand on top of that, making beautiful patterns. So that is something very also distinct to Bengal, and that also shows the Bengal connection that they have. And the women of the community, they stitch the kathas, and it has given them employment during this pandemic when their husbands, they could not travel back from the places they had gone to work. Also, they could not. These women used to, they weave fishing nets, and they were not getting the materials. So this was one of the other initiative taken. Another important aspect of Mia Poets is that Abdul Kalam Azad began this initiative called Ango Khabar. Now, Ango Khabar means our news. So it's a media initiative. Which does what? It makes documentaries, small documentaries of these people, these villagers living in the chores, and it discusses their problems, the problems that they have been facing. And they sometimes, it is to document the oral traditions, to document the folklore, and to document the songs, and also sometimes to raise funds for people. Like there was one such incident where one child's father was stuck in Delhi because he was a daily wage worker, and this child was in a very terrible condition. So they managed to raise a lot of money through that documentary, which was published by Ango Khabar. So these are the kind of like when we talk about dissemination. I mean, Homi K. Bhabha, in one of his books, The Location of Culture, talks about this whole idea of smaller histories being hidden within a larger national history. And that is what Mia, this Ango Khabar tries to do, that that is the fallacy of creating a single narrative, that for the idea of coherence, for the sake of unification, we tend to ignore these marginal voices that sometimes are so important that they almost threaten that whole idea of presumed coherence in the process of either if you say in the process of translation, you can say, in the process of assimilation, you can say. Now, another interesting aspect coming up these days recently, like few months back, is that these poets and the activists, they have been demanding a museum, a Mia museum. Now, what do the Mia museum do? So, the Bengal origin Muslims have a distinct way of agriculture practices. They use certain tools, they use certain handcrafted tools and different things which are not used by the other part of the other sections of the society. So they want those things to be documented. There is also mentioning of the cakes. I mean, pitha, what we call pitha, like sweet breads or whatever we make during our Makar Sankranti. So even the Mia people do that because, of course, their ancestry is Bengali, but that is not something unique to Assamese culture. So that is also getting faded away slowly. Another, so this Mia museum, this request for Mia museum was again denied, and the reason given was that these people do not have a culture. Now, what sort of an argument is that? When somebody says that these people do not have a culture, this word itself, when I say that this particular group does not have a culture, asserts the superiority that I have towards my own culture. And how can a language culture, how can any group of people who have thrived for so long, for such a long duration, how can they not have a language culture of their own, right? So that was one another instance where this thing was denied to them. Now, uh, as it happens in every community, it is also important to note the distinction, the division between the within the Mia community itself. So, interestingly, there were a group of professors and academicians who belonged from the Mia community who I had the chance of talking to, and they strongly disagree with Mia poetry. They say that no, we are not Mias. why should we want to be addressed by a word or a name that has been, so humiliating to us? We do not want to do this, and we do not want to associate with this group of people. So these are the group of people who want to be appropriated and assimilated into the Assamese society. So while the Mia poets, wanting a kind of assimilation, also want to mark their, a kind of their territory, or where they say that no, we cannot let go of our identity. There is a group of people within the community who are willing to let that go, and they want to be appropriated. Now, not to be judged, because that sort of appropriation also comes through a lot of systemic pressure, a systemic stems from a lot of systemic violence. Because if I'm appropriate into a language culture, my life becomes easier. I am no longer the subject of mockery. I'm no longer the subject of humiliation and oppression. So it is it is not to be judged on their part, but that is a facet of which I felt was important to mention here, because it shows two sides of the coins. Any study, any work of research should always carry both the connotations of what is happening. Now I think the time is ending, and also before I miss out on anything, I'll just show you all the last few slides that I have, and I'll share my screen again. So um I don't think I can find it. Yeah. Yeah, this is an image of one of the most important researchers of this community, called Qurban Ali Chaudhary. Qurban Ali Chaudhary is this person. Qurban Ali Chaudhary actually is somebody who has been working in that area for like almost 25 years. And when he was documenting these cultural practices, the stories, he has even recorded the mantras used to shoo away ghosts. That is his level of dedication to the work he has done. So now it is only now that he has gained that sort of respect, and the kind of acknowledgement that should have been given to him a long back. But now that this is a part of his house, where you can see this is something. It looks like a very traditional Assamese household. These round structures that are hanging in the wall. These are called japi, and these are used for agriculture. And this is a decorative japi, and this is something which is given as a token of honor to anybody during any public gathering. Like for example, we give like a shawl or something, and we give a plant, and then that is our culture. So this japi and this gamosha, this gamcha, what we call in Bangla, or the local language of Jharkhand, this is this white and red thing. This is the gamosa, and that is actually also a token of appreciation and token of honor. And you can see that, with all due respect, while sustaining his Nia identity, this person is also very, very respectful towards the Assamese identity and Assamese heritage. This is Abdul Kalam Azad. He needs to be mentioned because he has been doing great work in his for the people of the community, and he is the founder of Ango Khabar, which is our news. This is a woman worker. Her name is Zubeda Khatun, and she actually is a handicraft worker who um, weaves kantha, and she's working for Amrapali, Assam. And this is an excerpt of an interview where she talks about the hardships that she has faced during the lockdown, and how the Mia poets and Amrapali came to her help. Then this is a teacher taking class. I mentioned the classes, like the free classes. This is a teacher who is is one of the tin schools. It's Rupakuchi Chor. This is a school. I mean, this school is a government school, but this set up, the 30 students and the teacher, that is done by the foundation. Now, this is Manjuara Mulla, the founder of Amrapari Assam, the woman in blue. And with her is Anjumanara Begum, her mentor. And they are discussing about the problems faced by the woman, of spreading awareness about different aspects of women health and, domestic violence, and all of that issues among the people of. And this is the one of the most backward chores of the area. And the place here is, this is actually um, Parakumar Das Church Library and Research Center, which has been set up by the Mia poets. And why the name Parakumar Das? Because Parakumar Das was actually a journalist who has been working for the welfare of this people, the Mia community, and he was murdered. So, in honor of that, they named the foundation after Parakumar Das. And this library has, like literally helped a lot of people, a lot of students. They try to, initiate the discussion and awareness about education in the area. They even give free education. So, this is one of the pictures. This is another. These are two of the people in Majid Bhita Church. This is what I was talking about when I said that the look is very distinctive as a Mia with a lungi and a beard, and this is the look that has resulted in. I mean, every time a national Assamese nationalist comes across, they will throw slurs at them. This is one of the poems. I would like to end with it because I find it very, very powerful. Written again by Shalim M. Hussain, who says that, and this is a very good take on, the idea of appropriation and the idea of what, foreignization does, or what exoticization, like even with case of Jharkhand, I feel that the kind of work, the body of work that has emerged from Hasda Sobendra Sekhar, who writes the Adivasi will not dance, when he says that we should not only be kept as a token of representing the Jharkhandi culture, you know so that same thing, like, it should be more than representation, it should be more than tokenization. Here he says, you cursed me with inverted commas, this is what I call myself, Midas. This is what you made me, inverted comma, Midas. These inverted commas, these donkey ears, you planted them on my head and praised your own large heart. I tear your donkey ears and fling them at your feet. Roast them with salt, ginger, garlic, paprika, cumin, or ask me for a better recipe. Eat your donkey ear, my lords. Eat your inverted commas. So, yeah, this is the poem that came, and I am very, very I hope that this is something happened. Just a second. Yeah, is the screen back to normal now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So yeah, this was a short presentation, not a short one, actually quite long. So I think I'm able to, I hope that I'm able to carry across what I wanted to say. And if you have any doubts, queries regarding the whole discussion, please feel free. Any thoughts, inputs, I'd be very, very honored.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Sapshika ma'am. This was seriously an enlightening session. The way you talked about so many things on Mia poetry, and how poem can be, monumental things in leading such cultural in such cultural movements regarding someone's identity. How the infographic things that you shared with us, about their culture and how they are including Assamese heritage into their own homes. And there was many controversial things that has been spread regarding the Mia poetries. For example, Doroi had, asked why Mia poetry had come up, especially in the time of NRC. And you have answered that question very clearly and resolutely. So thank you so much, Dakshika ma'am, for such an enlightening session.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Uh, we have Anjali. She wants to ask a question. So, Anjali, if you can unmute yourself.
Yes, sir. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, respected teachers. Ma'am, I have a question in general that I'm curious to know. What do you think would be a major reason behind the emotional barrier between the Northeast people and the mainland people? Is it because of the loophole in our education system that we weren't even taught much about the history of Northeast India, in our textbooks? Or would that be the only reason for the disparity? And how could this racial discrimination could be eradicated? What are your views on that?
Yeah, so see, I honestly do not feel that it is just, I mean, of course, there is the way the state sponsored narratives, travel, the way one narrative is being forced from the childhood when we read books. It is true that we have never come across much about the Northeastern culture. And now also when we say, we just use the term Northeastern as a consolidated term, and we do not, we literally do not care to, go beyond that and, understand what themselves, stand
Yes,
for
true.
and all of that. But I also feel that, to some extent, it is also on us. Because, let's not go to Assam even. Let's just stay in Jharkhand and talk about, the kind of politics that happens, within the people who have come from outside and settled there, the tribals who have lived in that land, or the people who, for some or other reason, came to Jharkhand. So whenever, this is not just about Northeastern and the Indian, the rest of the Indian state, but it is
Yes,
about
I agree.
any
Yes, ma'am.
any two different language cultures. Any two different language cultures. Whenever we are attempting to understand, or whenever we are trying to, get a peek of the other language culture, there is a lot of bias in us, and it is our responsibility to understand that bias. No human being or nothing is, nobody is born perfect, from the beginning. So it is fine that there was a time when we were not aware of certain things. But now, given the situation now, it should be our responsibility to understand this fact that anybody who is not us should not be demeaned upon, should not be looked down upon. And I should have this acknowledgement that, I am not this all in one knowing person who can understand the other. I mean, the other or an other can be an other without me understanding them. I do not understand them. That is my lack, not the other's lack. And I think that is the change in narrative that we have to bring through our research and through our studies. And this is not just in the case of India and Assam, but also when we talk about the global south in general, like just because there are certain areas where the work has not been done, research has not been done, it is our lack. And when I honestly went to Assam, I'm also working with a group of people who are very different from the kind of language culture I was born and brought up in. But if I go with an all assumed idea and notion that, oh, I'm going to speak for the Mia poets, I think that would not be ethical on my part, because nobody should be speaking for anybody.
Yes, absolutely.
Understanding someone and
Yeah.
speaking for someone, this speaking for someone is what we have to stop doing. I think that is how I would look at this whole situation.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. So basically, it's a responsibility of an individual, first of all.
No, also it's state sponsored. I mean, I
Yeah.
did agree to that part where you said, and it's definitely because that's how
I mean,
narratives
yes,
are
ma'am. I
created,
got
right?
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And thank you
yeah.
so much, ma'am.
Deepshika, there are two questions in the chat box.
Chat box.
Ek, uh,
Let me just
ek,
have a look.
yeah, one by Pulkesh, one by Shreya Guha, and one by Masira Alam. Few questions in front.
Why is it that I can't see the chats?
Okay, Ekta, can you take up the questions, please?
Yes, sir, surely. One question is by Pulkesh Das. He asks, it is apart from the hegemony of the indigenous Assamese, it is also important to understand the socio-political history of the state. Politics of Assam is altogether incomplete without the polarization of Bangladeshi and indigenous. Besides, the political leaders of Mia community are reluctant to bring about any changes and in turn using the community to be in power. I think it is an observation more than a question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I completely agree with what he's saying, because I feel that yes, like when you look at the history of Assam, you know, this whole polarization that is mentioned very well, it does exist there because uh, somebody trying to say something.
Sejal Kumari, please unmute, please. You can continue.
Okay. So I feel that you know it is definitely very true, because you see Nelly massacre. So what happened in Nelly or Khakrabadi? So in Nelly, actually what happened was a whole village was massacred. Was the Muslims of Bengal origin were killed, and that was sponsored by the state. What happened in Khakrabadi was a clash between two different groups, where also a lot of Muslims and a lot of tribals were killed. And in one of these instances, Abdul Kalam Azad narrates one incident where he's actually in IIT it is Guwahati, where he is studying, and his roommate is a person from the tribal community, and they are sharing the same blanket. And at the same time, in Khakrabadi, these are the two groups that are fighting. So that is definitely there. It is not it Assam history cannot be without discussing the polarization of these two communities and what has happened. And as you said, with with respect to the Mia politicians, yes, it is very true. That's the reason I also brought up about the different other group of poets, like the other group of intellectuals within the community itself, who do not want to be associated. Same with the politicians, they are looking at their own benefit. But recently, it's a very good news that one of the poets called Ashraful Hussain actually got elected as the MLA of Chenga district. So now we can hope that yes, he will get some work done. And there was one MLA which was mentioned by all these people, but I'm forgetting the name. And they were actually saying that no, he has done some good work over the last tenure. Before that, the situation was really, really bad. And also, the kind of political affiliation of the Assam, the politics in Assam, the ruling government is not very sympathetic to the sentiments of the people. So that is another reason.
Thank you so much, ma'am. There's another question from Shreya Guha. She asks, since India is known for its diversity and a large number of ethnic and social groups reside here, isolating such marginalized communities completely based on their culture is nearly impossible, either they be the Miyas or the Adivasis. So don't you think by othering these communities, we are hindering our own identity as well, because these small communities and beautiful cultures are building blocks of our national identity?
Yeah, I mean, see, it's a very, what do I say? I mean, it's not that someone is othering them. I mean, it is othering that we are against. I mean, I think my entire presentation was about how not to, initiate this whole process of othering. And rather than othering, it should always be about understanding the other. And even if you cannot understand, try to acknowledge that fact that no, I cannot understand you, but I respect you and your differences. So now the problem is that, see, this is a very important question. I mean, important because I feel that, see, if we do not reinforce these differences, what will happen? What will happen if Mia poet stops saying what they're saying, or the Adivasi says that yes, I will dance at every function you call me to? What will happen? What will happen is that there will be a process of cultural appropriation and assimilation. Okay, that oh, this is an Adivasi, but but he can speak Hindi so well. He can, like talk like a Bengali. What is that if not as appropriation? Like I'm trying to make the other sound like me, or I'm appreciative of the other only when they sound like me or the mainstream. At the same with Mia poets also. If they say that no, it's fine, completely fine, do not give us our museums, do not give us our poetry, we do not care, we just want government jobs, we just want a house, we just want to live nicely, then the whole idea, the idea of difference here is important, because it is for this particular community, it is this very idea of difference that is the foundation of their very essence and their identity. That forms the foundation of an identity. If I cannot stick to my identity, what will remain of me? My language culture will be taken away from me. My identity, my socio-economic identity will be taken away from me. And this thing cannot be stopped, because when a child is born into a Mia community, they did not ask for all this history of discrimination that has already happened. But the moment you are born into the Mia community, the moment you say that, you're born into a Mia community, from that very moment onwards, you are part of the larger historical picture. You are part of the historical narrative of the discrimination, oppression, and humiliation that your ancestors have faced. And it has not stopped till now. If things have would have gotten better for the Mia poets, or things would have gotten better for the Mia, I narrated the incident where I could see the look in the eyes of the how they look at the poets, or how they look at at a person from the particular community. So that has not stopped yet. So despite having spoken so much, despite having asserted one's identity so much, almost nothing has happened even now. So then our job, or the job of the poets or these marginalized groups, to assert their differences within the larger rubric of a single culture, single nation, single history, I think it becomes more and more important. Am I taking too long? Like, am I giving really long answers?
No, not at all. Not at all. Ekta, please take up the last question, please. Ekta, are you here?
I think she's disconnected.
Last question ले लेते हैं उसके बाद.
There is one more question, ma'am. I am reading it out. By Masira Alam. She asks, how can we as people of a nation can contribute towards normalizing the Mia poets or the Mia community existence in general?
I think by not reacting extraordinarily to it. I mean, maybe by treating it as any other poetry, or by just assuming the fact that yes, everybody has the right to speak up and everybody has the right to showcase their part of the history. And I mean, see, the more I talk about it, the more it gets longer. But then I cannot not talk about this whole idea of experience. The importance of experience and the importance of understanding, because I think we are at a situation now when, I mean, take for different several instances. Like I remember I attended one conference where there was a person, a white American man, very privileged, very influential, who has worked a lot on Frantz Fanon, okay, in Algeria. So he went to Algeria, he stayed there, and he got all the manuscripts, that which is very rare to find, and you need a lot of money to do that kind of research, because not everybody can go to Algeria. Everybody who's working on Frantz Fanon cannot go to Algeria. So what happened when that particular conference was, there was one woman from Algeria who asked him this question, that who gets to keep track of the archives and the manuscripts, who gets to access these manuscripts. And then the response of this rather scholar, distinguished thinker and expert, was that no, but I went to Algeria, I did the research on my own, and I have done what much better work than what any other person could do. So so the reason I'm saying this is because what he is missing out is the essence of the whole question, that you could not have been able to go to Algeria and do that research if you had not been that privileged. If you did not have the kind of sponsoring that an Ivy League institute provides, you could have not gone to Algeria and because Indian students cannot do that. Literally, it's not possible for me to go to America and just do a research. So that is the important point here, that understanding the lack in our own understanding, I think that is very important. When I set out to do any sort of work, research, or understanding a group of people who might not be exactly who I am or what I come from, and I think nobody is. I think that very moment we have to acknowledge all these barriers that we have in ourselves, and that is the only way of normalizing anything, of not being disrespectful of the struggle, of the history of discrimination and violence one particular group has had gone through. And if they're speaking up now, instead of asking them and bombarding them with questions like, why are you speaking up now? Where were you so many years ago? I think that is a moment to be celebrated, where these marginal voices are now coming out and they're doing something for their community, and we reading them, we discussing them today. I think that's how this whole, discussion can go on further, and this whole thing will be normalized in no matter of time.
Very true. Saket, Ekta is here.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Ekta is here.
Ekta, please go ahead with the last part of the plan.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, Dipshika ma'am, once again. Before I continue, I would like to say that the feedback link has been sent in the group chat. Please submit your response. I would now request Ashish Sinha to come forward and conclude this event. Over to you, Ashi.
Yes. On the behalf of my college and the entire management group, I'm very hearty gratitude to Dipshika ma'am for sharing her experience today with all of us. It was a really wonderful and enriching experience, ma'am. So I would like to thank I would like to thank our department, head of the English department, Senior Ibrahim sir, and all the professors, Neha Tiwari ma'am, A.K. Das sir, Basundhara Roy ma'am, and Saket Kumar sir for organizing such an event, which is very helpful for all of us. And ma'am, I would again request you to please accept our thanks for such a great experience and great presentation today. And once again, thank you so much, ma'am, for your discussions. Thank you.
I have a small thing to say. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Yahya Ibrahim for giving me this opportunity today to, share my research with you. And as you can see, like I'm in the third year of my PhD, and I'm about to submit, and I'm writing the thesis now. So it's a humble request to all of you to please, because this work, the slides that I shared and the work that I shared, it has not been published anywhere, and it is against my research ethics. It will go against my research ethics if if I'm not able to give due credit. So if at all you plan on using the photographs, if any of you have taken the screenshot, I don't want to sound mean, but please do give due credit, because that is my hard-earned work which I've done in the field, and I have not published it. Once I publish it, I'll be very happy to share and send the entire presentation, but at this moment I'm not allowed to do that. So please, if any of you want to carry this forward, and if you want any help or any have ever taken any screenshot, it's completely fine. Just give me the credit doing the field work, and that is all. That will be enough. I don't want to sound this, but it is important for the research that I'm doing.
No, it is very important. It is very important because for research, ethics is certainly very important. And I also request our participants that whenever and wherever you are quoting her slides or you're using her slides, you should at least acknowledge that this has been taken from such and such person, from such and such lecture kind of thing, because that will be very helpful for her also. Apart from that, because it is hard earned, these are very hard earned things basically. I think that you must have felt that she was speaking from the heart as well as from the real lifetime experiences, because she has spent a lot of time in Assam researching in all these things, right? So she was passionate also, and she was quite very much talking with the well-versed research also. So I think that we should very careful. We should be very careful. You are free to use that, but you should just acknowledge the things, right? Deepshika, it was really very beautiful. It was passionate as well as I said, from it was coming from the heart, and it was also coming from a very factual based research. It was a beautiful lecture. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Vashudhara से आपकी मुलाकात नहीं हुई थी. Perhaps she joined late. Vashu, are you here still? Vashudhara is in our department.
I'm here, but I'm traveling at the moment.
Okay.
So,
तुम्हारा वीडियो नहीं आएगा?
एकदम डार्क आएगा.
अच्छा अच्छा अच्छा. Vashudhara is a published poet. She has published 2 collections of her poems, one from Writers Workshop and one more poem recently. One collection, very sorry.
Yeah, really nice.
In our department.
I feel that it's a very active and engaging department. Yeah, and the questions are also very good, and I'm really glad.
Let the things normalize, and if you are here in Jamshedpur, I mean in Ghatshila, so we'll surely call you to Jamshedpur also.
It was a wonderful presentation, Deepshika. Very, very informative. And this is a very new group which needs attention. I have read Hussein's poetry, and it's very, very powerful. Yes, you did a wonderful analysis. Thank you for sharing those pictures. It was wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm glad that it helped. And yeah, I mean, I would also like to meet you all in person someday. And I keep traveling to Jamshedpur. Like, I have a lot of relatives there. And
Sure.
And so the moment I come to Ghatshila, like right now I'm in Uttarakhand. I came here for some research work, and also, to write the thesis and all. So it's very cold here, as you can see. So I hope you all had a great time. And if you have any further doubts, please feel free to email me, and I'll be very happy to help you all.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, and we hope to see you, as Yayasa said, in person. We hope to see you soon after this lockdown and pandemic are over.
Yeah, sure. So should we just leave the meeting now?
Please.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.